Hi, my name is Philip Bloom, and this is a video which goes behind the scenes of how I made my film, breaking it down into what I did before I shot it, what I did while shooting it, and what I have to think about in post. So shooting cinematically comes down to lots of different factors. It isn't just camera movement. A lot of people get confused that, oh, we need to keep moving the camera. It's not. Sometimes you don't want to move the camera at all. Composition is more important than that. Which lenses you use, when to use shallow depth of field, when not to use shallow depth of field. Lighting. Lighting is one of the key things. Lighting doesn't necessarily mean lots of lights. It could be just one light. It could be using available lights, just harnessing it in the right way. Shooting cinematically also means fantastic, clear, perfect audio, well, as good as you can possibly get it in those situations. It adds so much to production if you have really good audio. Please never forget the importance of it. Having a mic on top of the camera and nothing else is not a way of getting good audio. The cameras that I used in the film were the FS700 with the version 3 firmware, so I could shoot continuous slow motion and also shoot 4K. The other camera I used was actually an Alpha 6000, which is a very small stills camera with a very high quality video mode. The reason I used this camera was because I put it on a stabilizing device. This one's called the Movi M5. In the sequence I shot out in the garden with Lois and Dean, it was very energetic. It would have been very, very difficult to shoot it in a very static way. And that's where the Movi, the stabilizer, came in really handy. I was able to move around them and get that feeling of really beautiful motion. And being really small and lightweight made it very portable for shooting Dean's traveling shots. The joy of putting a small camera on a stabilizer meant I could use it for pretty much all of the evening without getting too tired. One piece of gear that I use, which is essential to a camera without NDs, like this stills camera, like very many cameras out there, the FS700 has them built in, and that is ND. I was using a variable ND filter which goes on the front of the lens, screwed it on, and you can vary the amount of light coming in. I wanted to maintain my 50th of a second shutter speed. If you put too much shutter speed in, the motion is too artificial, too staccato-like. It doesn't look good. When it comes to interviewing somebody, the key thing is you are having a conversation with them. Don't forget that. You are trying to get information from them, but you're trying not to tell them what to say. In fact, don't tell them what to say, because that's the worst thing you can do. You want to be as natural as possible. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it can be really easy. Depends on the person. Also, it depends on you and how good you are. So make sure you have the eye contact, you're listening to them, you're not getting distracted, you're not keep looking at the camera. They are saying the most important things to you you've ever heard, and that's the way you've got to approach it. Listen to them, listen to what they're saying, and get the stuff out that you need. For the lighting for the interview, it was actually very simple. I only lit this with one single key at the front, which was some fluorescent tubes in a Kino Flow Diva, and the backlight was coming from the window on the back of Dean's head, but it's also in the frame. Now, if that sun went in, I'd lose my backlight and my whole shot would change. In a situation where I needed that continuity of light, I would black out the window and not have that light affecting my shot at all. I'd point in a different direction, because even if you didn't use the window, it would still affect the light coming in. Just remember about that continuity of light, because it changes not just the color temperature of your shot, but the whole amount of brightness that's affected it. Everything in that frame will change. Just because you have 4K doesn't mean you should always shoot 4K. If you're obviously hired to make a film that's 4K, then that's different. But if you're using it because you have it, use it for the right reasons. It's so nice to be able to shoot interviews like this and be able to punch in when you want to. Because if you're doing it any other way, just normal HD with one camera, you keep changing lenses or keep changing frame size with the zoom, but you may be on that wrong focal length at the key points. You can decide when to be close and when to be wide when shooting 4K. And it's one camera. Other people say, oh, I use two cameras, but this is one camera, much easier. And you can decide in post whether it should be tight, medium, or wide. Obviously, the widest bit is going to be the bit you shot in 4K for that frame. When you're using a 4K external recording solution with the FS700, you also have the ability to record continuous super slow motion. On this shoot I used 200 frames per second. You can get 240, but that's only in 24p mode. Shooting 25p here, which means the highest I can go is 200 frames per second. By being able to record continuously, it does unfortunately mean you record a lot more data, but it doesn't have this problem that you have when recording internally super slow motion, where you only have a short buffer of around 8 seconds or so. It means you're much more likely to capture the moment that you want. The absolute minimum shutter speed we can have at 200 frames per second is 1/200th of a second. You can't go any slower shutter speed than what you're recording frame rate. Ideally, it should be double for the right amount of motion blur. When using lights like I was using here, which gave me a very nice focused beam, unfortunately, you will get flicker if you start to dim them down. Now you can fix this in post with various plugins, but in an ideal world, you don't want to fix things in post, you do it in camera. Be very, very careful when shooting super slow motion. Look around, see what light there is, and make sure there's nothing else that's turned on, whether it's a light from a kitchen or a TV or something. Turn it all off. Shooting cinematically isn't just about making your visuals look fantastic, it's also about making sure your audio is really good as well, because sound is as important as the image. By far the biggest issue we had throughout the entire shoot was audio when we went into the basement of the club. Yes, it was also incredibly dark. The big problem though was audio. Music, people talking over each other, which means louder and louder. I could barely hear the person sat next to me. Now to actually record sound of somebody showing off a magic trick, even with a sound recordist, is almost impossible. So at this point I decided to just shoot B-roll footage of him just performing, just to cut into other stuff. I wasn't after real actuality moments, any sound bites. So therefore we had to go somewhere quieter to get the stuff that I needed of him performing, to tie in with the way that I wanted to tell the story, which was cutting back and forth between him and his son and a key magic trick that he was showing, but also just to get to hear him and how he interacts with the actual customers there. When I was outside with Lois and Dean playing, Dean wore a UWPD wireless transmitter, microphone sending the sound back to me, so I get some nice natural sound of him talking to her and just having a bit of fun rather than just some pretty shots. Ideally, you need to meet the people you're going to film if you can. That's not always going to be the case. Try and check out locations is really essential. It doesn't always happen. Quite often you just turn up at a location, just have to make the most of it. But if there is an opportunity to go to the location you're going to film in, absolutely recommend that. It has so many benefits. Apart from obviously seeing how much space you have, where you can put the camera, what the lighting situation is going to be, what it sounds like. This will help you prepare the gear for your shoot. You'll know what to bring. You'll always get that feeling when you're shooting, well, basically when you've finished the shoot, is have I got enough? And it is a difficult judgment call. It is always better to overshoot than undershoot. Trying to get enough of what you need to tell the story, and that's key. And that's where your list of things that you want to get should be ticked off and go through it. You will need to do editing in your head as you're moving things around, thinking this is going to go there, this is going to go, this is going there, especially if you have those variables that come along and change what you had planned. The last thing you want to do is get to the edit suite and realize you've missed something absolutely key. Try and review some of the stuff that you've shot on location if you get a chance to. It is always worth checking. Have a quick look, see that it looks good, see you've got what you need, and then move on.